Hello YouTube, GB Pirate here today. I'm sharing a brief update on the Community Mapping Competition 2026 and diving into the rubric, scoring system, and everything that our judges need to know in order to bring this competition to its conclusion. 6 months ago, when I announced the CMC 2026, I wasn't sure how successful we'd be, but I'm happy to be sticking to the schedule I laid out then, but really it's all about the maps. We had 15 submissions by early April when the submission window closed, but entering the scoring round now are 9 maps across 3 player count categories. 6 months is, in hindsight, quite a long time for a single event, but this allowed for some great playtesting sessions with the community and community judges. I do want to salute everyone that submitted a map, whether it's part of this final 9 or not. It's hard work getting a map into an engaging state, let alone working on all of the detail that goes into a professional level map for Company of Heroes 3. A special thank you to the judges and community for playtesting efforts, and a thank you to all of you who will be scoring these maps. So far, the competition has been incredibly successful. Let's hit it out of the park on this last stretch. The final 9 maps that are making it into the scoring round are, for 1 vs 1, Agrigento, Battle of the Leopold Canal, Mud and Blood, and Piani Falliti. For 2 vs 2, we have Buried City and Taka Pass. And for 4 vs 4, we have Radar Station Mammut, or Radar Station Mammoth, Sant'Angelo Crossing, and Victoria Falls. Now, for the scoring system. So how exactly is it going to work? To quickly summarize, I've made a single Google form for each map that the judges will each fill out. Their score is automatically recorded in a spreadsheet that only I can see. I'll tally up the points that each map receives from the judges, then divide that raw number by the quantity of judges that scored the map, getting a mean or an average score. This allows judges to sign up for the player count categories that they're interested in, and don't have to do more work than they'd like. The system is overall relatively unchanged since the first competition in 2024, and it works, I think, at selecting the best maps for Relic to add to the game, even if the final placement isn't exactly indicative of Relic's wishes. As of June 2026, there are 16 community-made maps in Company of Heroes 3's ranked match pool. 6 of them, or about 38%, are from the previous 2 competitions. 2024's competition led to 8-player Alam El Halfa and 4-player Santuario being introduced into the game, while 2025's competition contributed 4-player Wadi Darna, 8-player Oliveto Chitra, 8-player Castello della Nebbia, and 2-player Bologna. All but Bologna finished in the top 3 of each competition. I'll briefly explain how I came to use this method, but feel free to skip ahead to the next chapter if you're a judge, short on time, and you've scored at least one of the previous mapping competitions. In the final section of this video, I'll apply the rubric by scoring my map La Stella di Pietra to give you all an idea of what you're looking for, things like that. So, previous competitions for community maps, like the 2023 4 vs 4 competition hosted by Greyshot 117, where Oasis Depot took first place, asked judges to rank the maps against each other and place them on one list. This system works well for a single player count category, but I knew that if I wanted to attract the most interest and the most qualified community members to judge and create maps, I had to include all player counts, from 2 players to 8 players. Many top 1 vs 1 players don't even touch 4 vs 4, and vice versa. I looked to the past, particularly with Company of Heroes 2 and Kotu.org, and found a lot of helpful information in previous dialogue. It's been almost 3 years since I went on this deep dive, so forgive me for leaving out some details, but I looked at Monolithic Bacon's rubric for the 2014 Kotu mapping competition and used that as a direct inspiration for my rubric. The 2014, 16, and 17 Kotu competitions seem, from the forum posts, to rely on Relic to decide the winners. And the 2017 competition had some delays from what I recall reading, so between that and knowing that Relic went through so many changes after KO3's launch, I figured that it was best to do things as independently as possible. This is why I've always stressed that the competition results do not translate into any kind of guaranteed integration into KO3. But I've also stressed that these competitions are more like community efforts. The first competition raised funds entirely from the community, so having community judges, community funds, and community playtesting and feedback, I think helps keep a separation that lets us do our thing independently and on our own schedule. That being said, I'm very grateful that Relic agreed to fund last year's competition with $2,000 US, and this year's competition with $2,500 US. As far as I'm aware, this is the largest prize pool in code map making history. And the expanded prize pool this year has allowed the top 6 maps to earn a meaningful monetary reward for their creators' efforts. Relic, particularly Will, has some input in the competition as well. Aside from leaving detailed points of feedback for each map, he has graciously reviewed the scoring rubric and provided valuable feedback to it, which I have implemented. Will is also a judge, lending his knowledge to the final outcome of the competition. Additionally, I've worked to time the competition this year into one that works best for mine and Relic's schedules. Now, on to the rubric. Judges and mappers, for those of you scoring the maps, I'm going to walk you through the process with the rubric and my map La Stella di Pietra. The rubric here has, broadly speaking, 2 categories: gameplay, worth 60 points, and art, with 40 points, or 42 if a map has water present. Each of these categories is worth a different number of points, anywhere from 2 to 15. Taking inspiration from Will's 2014 Code2 mapping competition, I divided the points into 3 columns of low, passable, and high score. Any points in the low category will yield less than 50%, passable 50 to 80%, and high 75 to 100%. These qualifiers are subjective, but mean to act as a guide for how to interpret the particular things you do and don't like about a map, and where they ought to score in a numbered range. By recording these scores yourself, you can then judge each map against each other in a category by category basis. I know it's a bit of extra work, so I've gone ahead and made a template for you all that you can use to easily record your scores in each category for each map. Each gameplay and art subcategory has some lettered points underneath it. This is to both explain what each of them means and to give you some reminders of what to assess within it. Much of this is taken from Will's specific feedback he gave me for Kasserine Pass, which became Jebel Pass. Also, he gave this rubric a look over for last year's competition and made helpful suggestions that I've implemented. Rest assured that these are not just random points I've made up for the sake of it. Under each low, passable, and high column, I've made some interpretation of what would warrant that range of scores for each of the lettered subcategories. When you're scoring the map, you will choose an exact number, but this system is my attempt to make subjective interpretation or a kind of qualitative judgment into a quantitative one for the sake of comparison across map sizes and judge count. The rubric's categories for gameplay are base sector 5 points, territory 8 points, cover and height 10 points, engagement spaces 12 points, map flow 15 points, and pathfinding 10 points. For art, or 40 points, we have atmosphere lighting and camera 10 points, ground textures and tiles 15 points, grass 2 points, water 2 points, out of bounds and soft map edge 3 points, and presentation and map regions 10 points. So overall, this means that gameplay is worth about 60% of the score and art 40%. Next, I'll take us all through the scoring form to demonstrate what exactly it looks like and what that experience is like. Judges, please look at the judge channel in the Worldbuilders Discord for links to each form. You only have to score the maps in the categories you've signed up for. For you mappers, this will be in your mapping contestants channel. Remember, you only need to score the maps in the category or categories that you submitted a map into, but not your own map, of course. Before we get started, here are just a few reminders. First, for you non-mapper judges, please score every map in the category you've chosen. If you don't, I can't accept any of your scores. If a map is so bad that you don't want to score it, this would actually inflate the final score of the map and have it placed higher than it ought to be. But if I have to toss out your score, obviously that won't happen, but you won't have any input in this final and impactful stage of the competition. Second, your decisions are extremely important here. In last year's competition with the 13 maps, the top 6 received a monetary prize. There was a noticeable difference in score between 6th and 7th, but the overall spread between 1st and 6th was only 7 points. The first place map won by less than 4 points. The differences between 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th were about 1 point each, and the difference between 5th and 6th was less than a half point. Please be mindful of your scores and just how important a single point can be. Use the personal score tracker I've made to keep your wits about you, and your scores sorted too. Third, be critical but appreciative. You can give a lower score where it's warranted and a higher score where you think a map really stands out and shines. Don't be afraid to go low or go high. Fourth, I've gone ahead and taken out 2 versus 2 casino and 1 versus 1 Eterna farm. Their creators hadn't made some critical but necessary updates despite receiving feedback over various playtests and feedback periods. I've made an optional form for these 2 maps. If you'd like to use them as a kind of benchmark in your scores or to get a feel for the forums themselves, go ahead. The feedback from the forums could help these 2 mappers make further adjustments or aid their future projects. Again, these aren't necessary if you're scoring the 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2 categories, but the invitation is there for you to take. Now, let's jump into the form. All right, once you click on a link to a form, you're going to get this intro screen. It's going to show you your email here. I don't see your email. Little message here just explaining, use the form to score the map. If you'd like to remember the scores for each category, write it down. Everything I've said, well, not everything, but a lot of important points just condensed here in one paragraph. So you're going to go ahead and type your name, what you're commonly known as. Discord or Steam, most of us keep it consistent, but just don't confuse me. Thank you. All right. Oh yeah, and by the way, I do not see your email. This is only you. Google is tracking you. I am not tracking you. Okay, next. These next 2 sections are gameplay and art, and they're virtually identical. Here, you go category by category and award points. I've put each tactical map at the head of each section just to remind you of the map, what it looks like, etc. This one I made myself, this mini map, using Foolish Viceroy's tutorial, but he was also kind enough and made tactical maps for almost all of the competition finalist maps. So big shout out to him. I've gone ahead and placed the points and the lettered categories within the question, so you don't necessarily need another screen to refer back to the rubric if you don't want to. And this is a change from the last 2 competitions where I had you would pick low, passable, and high, and then you would choose the points. And that I think was just too tedious and made my spreadsheets a bit more needlessly complicated as well. So you just choose from the drop-down menu, random scores. I'm choosing random scores. You're actually thinking about this and being careful and comparing and all that jazz. Okay. So yeah, and this is the art category. It's literally the same. It just tells you the map can earn up to 100 points because there's no water, and art is worth 40 points. You've already gone over that. So nothing new there. So you just pick your points, and you can write some feedback here to share with the mapper if that's what you'd like me to do. But this, as you'll notice, this doesn't have the little red asterisk here, so it is an optional question. You don't have to write anything if you don't want to. But if you want to, go for it. You're going to submit, and this is just confirming the name of the map. And also another reminder here, please score every category or every map in the category or categories that you've signed up for. I don't want to have to throw your scores away, and I don't want you to just score your favorite maps and then leave others in the dust. That's not how we're going to do it this year. Okay, so really quick, before we head over to this map to kind of apply the rubric to the map itself, I'm going to show you what this kind of looks like on my end. So once you submit your scores, each map is going to have its own little sheet for me, and each question will have a score below. So I've been taking up my Ouija board, reading some tarot cards, sending out emails. So I've got former Emperor of Manchukuo, Puyi here, scored my map. CIA whistleblower John Kiriakou also gave this a score. Political philosopher John Locke also contributed. And then my alter ego, not GB Pirate, scored the map, as well as myself. So basically all this does is gives me the score. I've got some very simple, what do you call it? I can't think of the right word, but it automatically calculates the number for me. And then I can also do the same kind of thing, and I've automatically averaged the score here. So if the map was done, competition is being scored, this map would earn a 49.6, which is far too high for what this map actually is. And we will dive in shortly and figure that out. But oh yes, also the written feedback will go right here, and I can easily copy and paste into Discord and send it to the mappers themselves. Yeah, just some random comments from each of these guys, which is great. But yeah, so this the way the format and everything works out, it'll look exactly like this for me, and I'll have the scores calculated, put out another video, after all the results are in, to show you the winners. But now, without further ado, let's hop into Co3 and check out the map, and I'll kind of explain exactly point by point how this goes. So jumping into my map here, La Stella di Pietra. For starters, I would not let this map into the competition, just because it has fundamental flow issues. Although I did take some, competitive elements in here in terms of like, I try to do some things with cover and territory, capture point placement, things like that. But the first part going through the rubric here is the base sector. So there are 4 points. Size. Can all players and text structures fit? Do bunkers do their job, stay out of the way of building space, and aren't too vulnerable? And base boundaries. Are bases protected and allow units to flow in and out? And then building issues. Is there anything preventing you from constructing your next text structure or healing building? So size. One thing to note is that the British do have the largest base sectors. So you can go ahead and, with friends or perhaps with cheat command mods here, go ahead and just test, do your bases fit? And if we kind of do the auto building here, it might be a little cramped. But I think with all 4 players, the base is probably a little small, but it's not, you may not be entirely fighting for space. Then your next consideration is, I guess that you probably consider passable. There's still some space up here. And then for bunkers, letter B here, pretty easy. You just kind of look at the UI here. I'd say this bunker isn't quite covering this approach entirely. You could definitely see infantry squads sneaking through here. You have the middle approach covered. And this side, this bunker has a bit more coverage here, which is fine. You could probably even rotate it a little bit further more. So yeah, it kind of works. And of course, remember to check both sides. So that bunker's pretty alright. This bunker's okay as well. And the middles are covered. Base boundaries. Are bases protected and allow units to flow in and out? So that's a major issue here, where we have these big impassable walls, and they also kind of wrap around slightly, so you can't, you're really kind of penned into your base area. Definitely a knock against it. In terms of protection, you're probably able, you're able to put like a unit up here, even infantry, and they can fire down here. So you could imagine like a US bazooka squad or an anti-tank gun team, or even a tank can just kind of sit up here, and it won't destroy you, but it can, like, that'll really keep your opponent able to lock you into the base. And then building issues, definitely you can just select your text structures here and just kind of hover over the UI, and if it turns red over a spot that you think it shouldn't, or maybe there's a little, maybe the base is really large and there's a little tree or something. That's not going to, bother you. But here, the base is pretty wide open. There aren't random objects sticking out that will block your building of stuff. Maybe the rail. I think this is just a spline here. But yeah, so those are the kind of the four major things you want to consider with in terms of base sectors. Now, territory. This is super important for kind of the end user actually gaming experience, but it's actually pretty easy to change in the editor in terms of swapping the locations of points, or changing the location of points, swapping what a point is, whether it be fuel, munitions, the value of it. That's relatively easy to do. So this category is only worth, I believe, 8 points. So if you go ahead and look at the tactical map here, this map has, I want to say, 40 points, capture points exactly. It also has noted as 5 victory points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which isn't unheard of. I think there's one map that has 5 victory points. Maybe that's just in Co2. But yeah, and then in terms of resources, it has a lot of points. I think there's 39 or 40 in total, like I said. Strategic points, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that sort of falls in line. Did I count that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so that's sort of in line with the kind of 4 to 8. Some 1v1 maps, you might only have 2, maybe even 3. I think 8 might be pushing it a bit with the strategic points, especially because they're worth a little bit more now. They're not like a Co-1, like plus 3 manpower. Fuel range, you want 40 to 50 fuel. Some maps have 55. This map, I believe, has 60. So you got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 50, 55, 60. So yeah, 60 fuel is definitely over that. Well in excess of 40 and well in excess of 50. Munitions, there are, I believe, 18 of these plus 5 munition points, which is 90. So it's not, maybe this isn't disqualifying, but it's definitely something to watch out for because all of your units and things like that, they're really balanced around a kind of expected fuel and munitions income. But keep in mind there's that 3 versus 3 map, Gabas Gap, that has, I think, 66 fuel, but it has really aggressive cutoffs. And there's a wide range of munitions as well. I think there are maps that are below 80, like maybe 75. There are maps that have like 90 munitions, so it's not too crazy. Another thing to note is just, we're doing resource quantity right now. Yeah, so the next point is kind of safe resources. So in terms of fuel, you've got 10 fuel right outside your base. And then these fuels here are closer to the midpoint, to the midline. These fuels are even closer. So there's a lot of fuel up for grabs. And it's very, these are far, but like 10 fuel with 60 fuel in total, you might be a little down significantly. Because even though 10 fuel is a lot next to your base, and there's these plus 5s out here in the corners, it's you're gonna have a potential issue. I think the biggest point of actually gameplay is munitions. There aren't a lot of munitions close by your base, and like these plus 5s are relatively far away, and especially in terms of when you're discussing flow later, these munition points kind of in here are really going to be tough to get to. So I think it's going to be a kind of light munitions game, especially if you're on the back foot. And in a lot of cases, like in my map, Jebel Pass, for example, you have a plus 16 right next to your HQ, and the munitions income can kind of keep you in the game for a bit, with grenades and snares and all that. So that's definitely a kind of a knock against this map. layout. That's the next thing here. So the layout of the points. So the fuel is definitely kind of biased towards this half of the map, but that's sort of nullified by having the 3 victory points up here. But is that really... I don't know. The map has so many problems. The territory honestly isn't even something that's like the biggest flaw, I guess is what I would say. But yeah, just think about the overall distribution of points. I know I've made this point before in some videos and in Discord, but like if you think of Relic wants the games in Co3 to be kind of a certain duration. So how do you go about doing that? You don't have, like, you wouldn't have a, kind of safe victory points and lots of safe fuel, because then what's on your middle line? So generally you might have maps where you have victory points on the center line with some safe fuel, or you might have safe victory points with fuel all along the midline here. In a map like this without cutoffs, which we get into the next point, there isn't a lot of kind of, the cutoffs will sort of draw your attention away from the resource points themselves and to those cutoff points, kind of another weighty area in terms of importance of where to focus. So in a map like this, where we lack those, you really need, the map needs to kind of make a little bit more pressure on the teams in terms of fuel and victory points and time. But yeah, like I said, territory isn't the biggest issue with this map. It's more comes down to flow. But I think I said this before, but this map would not be cool map, but it would not make it into the scoring round of the competition. It just has those fundamental flaws. But yeah, the next point under territory is cutoffs, and these are almost always necessary in 1 versus 1 and 2 versus 2, and then in 3v3 and 4v4, they're encouraged. There's so many points to take, like there just aren't cutoffs here, which isn't bad. But definitely in a 1v1 map, you're probably going to want to see some kind of cutoff play. And then part of the environment. So we want to, how well does the territory map mesh with the battlefield? Does the territory flow with natural boundaries or feel tacked on at the end? So because this is a very man-made area, the territory points are very, the territory boundaries are very artificial, but it kind of matches the setting here. I've painted the territory to kind of match with the roads, or in these corners here, I've painted the territory to match with these kind of permanent blocker walls. So I'd say, yeah, the map maker did a good job of making the territory scene part of the environment. There are still arbitrary lines, and even even in official maps in the map pool. But that isn't a bad thing. It might look a little weird here. There's also these kind of, I forget what the technical term is for these things, a bray and false bray. Generally speaking, you're going to want your territory lines to conform to permanent blockers, buildings, things like that. So these corners are all kind of left alone. This one might be okay because I've split the bray in half. So the line kind of works through, but then, you still have this blocker kind of floating in the middle of the territory sector, and you really want these permanent blockers to be the borders. So yeah, overall, I'd probably give this like maybe a passable score. In terms of territory, probably lower on the passable scale. Right. That's not exactly the right word I wanted to use. But yeah, probably lower end, maybe even a low score. 3 points, maybe 4 points. The next point is cover and height. So we have cover mix. Is there a good ratio between light and heavy cover? Is cover balanced? Does the placement of cover allow for multiple ways to approach engagements? Heavy cover balance. Is it balanced? Is it but not overpowered? And then the height bonus. Is it easy to tell which areas will provide the bonus and where you'll suffer against it? Is height balanced for both teams and possible to counter or adapt to? I don't want to go too much into this point because it's a lot of really looking at the minute details of the map. I think the easiest thing to start is with cover, and basically all of these high walls will provide you cover against units that are below them. Some of these walls have these slope sections, so you'll definitely have a gradient at a certain point. But it's not too big of a deal. I was doing some testing, I believe, and even these brays here, if you're on top of them, they will allow you to shoot at, you will get the height bonus against enemy units below. The only exception are these kind of corner redoubts, where if you're on this kind of lower pathway, you're not getting that 3.5 meters of height delta, so the cover bonus won't kick into effect. But especially if you have a map with a lot of kind of sloping hill, you really want to, I'm thinking of like Agrigento, where you have the amphitheater on one part, and then you have a kind of gentler slope and a building on the other. I think that's going to be an important debate in terms of, is the height bonus there covered? Is it not? Is it the height bonus covered? Is the height bonus balanced? I think it's an arguably yes and no. Height has different bonuses and protections rather than heavy cover. But it's not, I don't think it's a super decisive factor in that map. Also, this wall here will provide you cover even in this area here. I've tested that. I don't want to bore you guys. The first take I did of this took almost an hour, so I'm trying to speed this up. Yeah. So yeah, cover and height, you just want to make sure your green cover isn't too dominant with the map flow here. Sure, this green cover is pretty strong, but maybe if you get a unit up here on the flank or even kind of in the middle here, and this is traversable. That's what these are. These are sidewalks sticking up, so you can walk over. But yeah, you can nullify this green cover or this truck right here. Normally, this is a really scary position, but you can get up here and counteract the cover. Is this super flankable? No, because this is a choke point. These are choke points here with the stairs. Yeah, it's definitely suffering on the cover and height level category here. Our next category is engagement spaces, which are the areas in and around capture zones. And the 4 points you want to consider here are flow. Are there multiple ways to approach important capture zones? Heavy cover. Is heavy cover in capture zones for good reasons? Is this balanced? Buildings. Are capture points far enough away from buildings? Are buildings too prominent at or near key points? And capture zone type. Could different kinds of capture zones be used to improve the map, such as squares, rectangles, and different sizes of circles? So I'll start backwards here, actually. So I do use different capture zones in this map that kind of fit where we are. So we've got a kind of medium-sized square here for this road. And over here we've got a very tiny square in this little kind of alleyway-esque thing. In the middle here we've got a larger square. This could be a circle, but I think using different sizes of capture zones to reflect where we are in the map. Like here we've got a small little circle. I think I did a good job kind of changing up the capture zones, kind of fitting the shapes that they're in of the larger space. So I'd say sure, that's a good thing. We'll think of that, not even thinking point wise yet, but just thinking, okay, that's a positive point. There's some variety in the capture zone size, and it's not just random. There's some logic to it. The third point, C, are buildings. Are capture points far enough away from buildings? Are they too prominent at our key points? This center of this map is filled with buildings. The key points, sure, there's plus 10 fuel. There's some buildings in the corners. They don't have windows facing the center, although they do have these kind of smaller buildings pointing pointing in the opposite direction. Well, this is actually kind of unbalanced because you have windows here, but you don't have windows here. So why did I change this? I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, but yeah, we also, especially these four kind of corner points here, buildings are right next there. So you could be capturing this point and an enemy squad just comes here, hops in the building, and surprises you, and you basically have to retreat or hop in the building. But even then, like this, there's no doors here, so you have to go all the way around. It's just bad design, very unfun. But is it balanced? I mean, no, because on this side, you've got doors over here, and these are kind of symmetrically balanced with each other to be opposite. In this corner, we've got a huge gap here, and then a building here. But in this corner, we have a very narrow, much more narrower area with lots of windows here. And then the church is kind of, the door is pretty far. So there's no hope of kind of quickly hopping in a building right next to the point. These corner points have buildings everywhere. It's a hot mess. So this is definitely getting a very low score, mentally in that building category. The second point is heavy cover. Now in Co 1, you had to actually right click on the point and capture it as an action. We didn't have the areas here, and you would get a huge penalty to your unit when capturing. In Co 2 and Co 3, Relic has done away with that, and so you, in a lot of times, especially, it can really depend on a lot of context, but you kind of often want the player to choose between, can I capture or can I get in cover and win the engagement? So sometimes I'm thinking of the Sphinx's Alam El Halfa. You have points in the middle of the map where there is cover around the capture edge, and you're supposed to be able to get cover, and it's balanced. But you want to kind of use that in a meaningful and balanced way, and that map did a good job of it, I think. That center area, even though it's wide open, it's still interesting for a while. But here, you can still sort of capture while in cover, which isn't a bad thing, but it's just very useless. It's almost like a bit of a trap. There's some green cover here in the capture zone, but again, you're out in the open and exposed against garrisons, so it's not super consequential. And like I said before, the biggest issues here are flow and buildings. So the cover, it's almost, I'd give it a low score and move on. So thinking about the last point in engagement spaces is flow. Are there multiple ways to approach important capture zones? So a lot of times with resources, points by your base, not a big deal for thinking about flow, because there just aren't that many engagements happening around there. But when you look at center points, the middle, there are so many ways to approach. You can come this way, like from all corners, basically. There's even all four corners plus the cardinal directions. The other points, flow-wise here, you've got buildings in the way. So yeah, once again, for engagement spaces, I'd give this map rather low score. It just, map flow, which is the next section, is just a significant issue here. So with map flow, there's another kind of 4 points to consider. The use of permanent or semi-permanent blockers create an interesting and engaging experience. Dynamic battlefields. Does the use of semi-permanent blockers, this isn't super required but kind of important for the co-experience, do kind of these destructible elements create a meaningful and dynamic experience as the game progresses? So can you knock down walls? Can you knock down buildings? Can you knock down hedges and open up new lanes of attack, or maybe flank a pesky MG or a sniper, things like that. Buildings. Do buildings add or detract to the flow? Are windows, doors, and building height taken into account? And then retreating. Are retreat paths not overly punishing? So again, I'm going to take this from the back. So retreating, it's kind of like essentially, will a unit, when you can't control it, when it's only trying to get back to your HQ as fast as possible, does it take a really circuitous route, or does it take a circuitous route that like exposes itself to more danger, or is a retreat path kind of obvious and knowable, and you're not having to go around a bunch of objects like you're in a maze? In this map, I don't know, it requires a lot of playtesting, especially against people. I'd generally think of it in a poor way because you have so many, what's the right word? So many things blocking you from retreating quickly. So you got these stairs here. Also, in this narrow part up here, you could potentially use engineers to wire this off. That just happened instantly because of the cheat commands mod. But like you could imagine, maybe you have an engineer squad flank here. You can somehow build this barbed wire gap and fighting engagement here. And instead of retreating this way, all of a sudden you make your opponent move this way through the city, exposing themselves to more harm. I don't know. It just it's a important point. Another, I think in team games, it really comes up when you have split bases in like a 2 and a 2. And if you're trying to operate in the middle, maybe you're exposed, one pair has their units more exposed in a more dangerous retreat path than the other because they're not exactly, maybe the map isn't exactly centered, or the kind of center, the midline of the territory points are kind of on a skew. Yeah, I guess it's kind of a smaller point, but still something that you want to take into consideration, especially when you get into those higher levels of play where players are generally more aggressive and looking to wipe units as early as possible, and will take advantage of every little thing, everything that they can. So the third point under flow, buildings. Do buildings add or detract to the flow? Are windows, doors, and building height taken into account? So buildings here definitely detract from the flow. There's too many of them. There's some imbalance in window quantity. So here we've got this 3-story building fighting against this 2-story building, but they're kind of interspersed everywhere. It's definitely more of a point to consider on 1v1s, where the number of windows exposed to a certain side is actually really important for balance, because you just have so many fewer potential balance considerations happening in a 1 versus 1, where every little thing can make a difference. Whereas in a 4 versus 4, you have so many things to account for that the little minutia for each little issue, for each little thing, isn't super important. because you're kind of, you just thinking of everything in a more larger aggregate kind of balance here. There are windows everywhere. I don't know. The map is definitely getting a low score for flow. Maybe, if Will was scoring, maybe he'd give it a 0. Maybe it deserves a 1. Dynamic battlefields. This is walls, semi-permanent blockers. So yeah, there's some walls here, but ultimately they're not too important. And then you have these big imposing perma-blocker walls throughout that really divide things up. So yeah, again, very low score here. Just not very dynamic. I mean, the buildings might be interesting, but really it's all those permanent blocker walls are too much. And then map flow, yeah, the permanent blockers super restrictive. The stairs add a little bit to flow, but and these brays are kind of partially destroyed. Like, you can go up the ends here. This one has a few random holes in it. This one is largely intact, but still traversable, and this one has a big hole in the middle. But again, you have the whole perimeter here, very restrictive. So yeah, map flow, definitely very low score. The final gameplay section is pathfinding. So there are 2 points here: communication and effectiveness, and universality. So universality is, I kind of think of this kind of in the opposite, where you want to make paths work for all unit types, but if you want to make them specifically for not all unit types, like you want an infantry only path, you mark them clearly. So an example I think I do well here are these stairs and all of these big walls, and in these kind of outer portions as well. Units can actually traverse up here, which is cool. I'd say, yeah, for this kind of point of universality, yeah, the points where vehicles cannot go up, maybe you could fit a scout car or a dingo, I'm not exactly sure, but like, you couldn't stick a medium tank up here. You can actually try that out here. I think this is a positive point on my end for this map. Okay. Yeah, so you can't send tanks upstairs. That's good. Oh goodness, let's see, is this gonna work? Oh no. Oh no. Okay, well, back to the drawing board here. Okay, so so never mind. We're gonna have to give these stairs a look and fix them. But see, this stair isn't passable. Oh goodness. Okay. Well, see, that's why testing is important, kids. Yeah, so we'll teleport a unit here. I'm surprised it can go up those stairs. So yeah. Okay. Point taken away. The other thing, pathfinding, with pathfinding is communication effectiveness. Are routes through the map obvious and guide players to important areas? Is there anything impeding the pathfinding that shouldn't be? So that could be if you forget about an object that's sunk into the ground, and as if for some reason my engineers would have to go all the way around because of like a sunken rock or something sticking out through here. Generally, I don't know how well in this rural environment paths kind of lead you to the points, but in a lot of urban settings, you'll have different trails and paths will lead you to a capture point. So you kind of see that principle here, where these little paths I've carved actually do lead to the capture point, and they actually lead down the stairs as well. So I'd say, sure, I did a decent job communicating the paths. The paths kind of guide you to the important areas of the map, or at least the important areas in that little sector. Maybe not so much here, but maybe that isn't, it's a small thing in the grand scheme of things. But you've got to consider, how well. I'm not asking the judges to really go case by case and spend an hour and a half or 2 hours really thinking of each map. Kind of right now at the end of it, you're spending that time beforehand play testing and getting used to the maps, and then kind of coming up with a judgment later. But yeah, so generally I've tried to make the paths lead to capture points in the kind of wider open areas. But the urban areas, it's a bit messy. Pathfinding, I mean, from this angle, sure, you can kind of come in here, but there's nothing really guiding you to this point other than the fact that it's in this little courtyard. But I've done that a lot to a certain degree, where the kind of the open spaces. I don't know. I'm just rambling now, guys. Okay, so that's the 60 points for gameplay. So moving on to the art section for the 40 points. The first category here is atmosphere, lighting, and camera. So you've got the points lighting, shadows, camera, and fog clouds miscellaneous. With lighting, you're really looking at a bunch of different factors, but kind of the end product is you generally want to see the ground textures. If the light is too high, you'll get a very kind of washed out look. You won't see a lot of detail in the tiles. And I forget the exact angle of the sun here, but it's something reasonable, like 35 degrees or something, maybe 30, maybe 40. Well, maybe not quite 40, maybe 25. You really want to look at how well do objects look in the shadows. It's a hard thing to kind of think about, I suppose. It's easier to really look at things like shadows and fog, especially as someone who isn't an artist. It's even hard for me to tell what should or shouldn't be changed and what issues there are. But yeah, the thing with the shadows is you don't want a sun too low to cast really long shadows. You can also adjust how dark the shadows appear and how dark they are closer to the objects they are. There's so many settings here with the atmosphere and light. But you don't want shadows that will be super distracting and really obscure things for the player. And I think overall, in terms of lighting, the shadows and everything aren't too distracting. With camera, you really want to look at kind of the default camera angle, and then maybe things that are slightly what you'd expect. So maybe like you tilt the camera down slightly. I think a lot of players do that, but it's less common to even just point your camera directly at the enemy, your opponent. But I know some players do that. But generally, yeah, kind of focus on the default camera. One thing I tried to do is, one thing to consider actually with the camera, is that you don't want to have too much space occupied by tall objects. So when we've got here this high wall with this tall tree, we've got so much foliage here taking up the middle of the camera. And even when we try to move beyond the tree, we've got another tree here taking up more real estate space. This is directly in line with the camera, so it's probably not great. Kind of similar issue here with this big tree on the wall. And then as well here we've got lots of tall foliage, more tall foliage, still kind of parallel-ish in the direction of that you would be panning with the default camera. In the city, I tried to make some compromises. So here, for example, I think is a great example where you've got the tall 3-story buildings here, but then as you're looking down here, you've got 2-story buildings. So imagine if these were even taller, were 3 stories, you'd be getting even more obscured of an angle. Looking here as well, with this courtyard, there's this gap here, and even though these buildings are tall, you're kind of able to still see beyond them. And also moving in towards the middle of the map, there's this big open space, another short building. So things aren't too crazy. Yeah, I don't know. There's just too many buildings on this map to make it that great for as a competitive map, and I didn't design it that way on purpose. But here, kind of similar thing. Tall 3-story building in front, 2-story building on the other opposite side. This might be a bit of an issue in these corners where we have these tall parallel buildings, but I think because they're skinny, there isn't actually that much terrain being obscured. But yeah, you just want to think about like when you're, especially in the busy areas, the very middle of the map or kind of in that center line, is your vision really obscured? And I think the answer is generally no. I think I did a good job keeping this midline open. But again, I think at this category, I might make it on the higher end of passable. There are some issues, but I think generally it's a decent showing, at least in the busy areas. I am still a bit worried about these corners here, but yeah, those are just things to consider. Now, ground textures and tiles. If you're not an artist like me, I get that this can be kind of difficult to score, but you want the 4 points here: realism, tile usage, blending and contrast, and regions. So with realism, you kind of want a real looking mix of textures. One thing I did in early versions of Jebel Pass is, I'm going to kind of mix a bunch of different things here, different tiles and splats and splines, but I'm going to kind of make them varying opacities, and they all kind of muddle themselves together. And that really isn't what you want, because nothing really looks clear. I think the ground tiles and textures here, I really want to retile the whole map, but I spent so much time on this thing, I was getting sick of it. And it's so much territory to tile as well. I think this would get a really low score in this section here because it just looks, there's too much repetition. You can see the patterns pretty obviously. There's a mix of tiles, but I don't think there's really a great lot of blending done. There aren't too many, I don't think there are any spots or splines here to kind of mix things together. And I get that it can be hard to judge this individually, but I think if you compare the maps and you think, okay, I really like the tile and texture work on this map, and I think it's better than this one. So then you kind of pick a number and maybe work around from there. Maybe you don't pick the highest score for the tiles because you're like, well, there's still a little, some issues that could be fixed, or this thing looks kind of ugly, and go from there. And what's the next thing? Tile usage. There should be a variety of tiles used, and they should be appropriate. So you don't want to be putting like grass randomly here in the middle of the city. But like in this example here, I've got like a little tree. I can't even, like a little garden space, and there's some trees growing out of it. Okay, so sure, there's not a tree. There aren't palm trees growing out of the tile with nothing underneath. It's just making things realistic, right? Like this tree as well has a nice little square around it with some grass. Same thing as well here with the flowers and trees. So sure, there's some, appropriate use of tiles. I'm not putting objects where they shouldn't be based on the ground tiles. I will say there's too much variety. I use way too many tiles here. on this map. And it doesn't really make sense. I don't know. It looks, and then there's this random spline here. What is this doing? I don't know. I would give this a low score. Another thing to consider is that we aren't using too many splats and splines like in Co 1 and Co 2. But yeah, just too many words. I don't know. I like the way the mud looks. Maybe that's just an engine thing. But I spent a lot of time on this little guy here. But when you go like kind of directly over it without the reflections, maybe it could use a little bit of better blending. There are some splats and splines here. This is the spline. These are mud splats. Yeah, I kind of like the way this looks. I don't know. It's overall, it's too flat, I think. Anyway. But yeah, moving on. I'm sort of already moved on to the blending and contrast here. And this is another point where there's some overlap here where the blending and contrast do clear pathways guide players to key locations. And I mentioned that in, I think, engagement spaces. I don't remember. But yeah, a lot of the marking clear, maybe pathfinding. Yeah, pathfinding. So maybe not. I don't remember. Goodness. But yeah, I've used kind of this gravelly tile to make paths in the grass. And I think this road spline you see throughout, it doesn't have the variety because it's literally the same thing. And you can kind of see the faded edge here. It doesn't look very good. I would definitely redo this. Like here, this is very obvious edges here, but it's not. We've got the gravel as well on the road, and it doesn't. This definitely needs another tiling texture pass. But I just find that so difficult to do because you got to keep a lot of things in your short-term memory, different values of brushes and everything. But again, I'm rambling. I've been rambling. Moving on. Regions. Not required, but when it comes to ground texture, you can use ground textures to help you make certain parts of your map distinct. So you might have a battle-worn forest, and you'll use the kind of destroyed, battle-worn textures or tiles to really sell that location. And you won't just paint it the same kind of grass and then have little like destruction splats over it. I'd say region-wise, the map kind of struggles in that you have the big city in the middle, which is as big as a 1 versus 1 map. And then you have the grass kind of in the outside. Each side does sort of have its own look. Like we've got a little bit of rock here. Actually, I'll start here. We've got a little bit of rockiness, but it's rather green and grassy. With some random olive trees. Then going over here, we've got still a bit more orchards or olive trees, a bit more rock, pebbles, or what is this this tile? I think this is like grass clumps. Yeah. And then over here we've got a bit more grass clumps and gravel. I don't know. It's hard. I'd really use kind of the art part as a comparison tool. If you're a professional artist, or maybe you make maps and you can kind of say, hey, I would use this tile, use those splats, use this spline and recolor it, etc. Definitely go in deep if that's what you're feeling. But if you're like me, you're more of a gameplay oriented person, I definitely get if this is difficult to really pick the point values. yeah, and in this corner, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to judge your own work, and that's why mappers that are judging you aren't scoring your own maps. Because I feel like it's, I don't know. It's a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons is that it is kind of hard to judge your own work. Trying to, instead of like knowing that you did this, what your intentions were, does that translate to someone who just, boots up the map and has played some skirmishes against other players or even against the AI just to test out the map? It's really hard to gauge that. Yeah, and that's the last point. Yeah, that is. Okay, moving on to grass. This is a really quick category, 0, 1, or 2 points. Quantity. Is there too much grass, not enough grass? How does it look in the wind? Maybe the wind value is really high and the grass is blowing too much. I think the wind's a little high, but I don't think it looks too out of place. The tall tulips are a bit distracting, but there's been a lot of blending efforts, I suppose. I don't know, just do what you think feels right. If the grass is like really ugly, if there's too much of it, if it's just, imagine if this whole field was just this purple or red flowers, that would be like, yeah, too much grass. It looks bad. There could be some more grass up here, actually. Like there's leaves, there's all of these oak hedges. There could be some grass here. So maybe we're missing some grass in this part. And then over here, maybe we should use less flowers, less random colors. These tulips are so high as well. Yeah, maybe there's too much purple. I don't know. It's 2 points. So it's not, not the end of the world. Water, I guess I'd kind of say the same thing. You judge the water kind of based on how it looks. If it's like really distracting, I don't think the water should be distracting. It should also look good, but if there's something that's really catching your eye that's bothering you, maybe you knock it down a point. But again, it's, only 2 points, not the end of the world. Depending on what you're feeling. The last point here, super important from a kind of quality of life point, but in terms of, there's only a 3-point category here with out of bounds and the soft map edge. The soft map edge is, it's related to your territory boundary. So if the players draw it right, their territory boundary here should be a very strong line, and it roughly corresponds to the dashes here. You only see the territory extending beyond the border here in the base sector, and that's sort of a technical thing. So units, when you have your entry point beacon, if it's not in the base sector, your off-map units will spawn from your HQ, and that's just something that Co3, we aren't supposed to do it in multiplayer. You're generally supposed to have about, like this is too narrow of a distance. I think this is 16 meters. I think the kind of recommended minimum is 32. So you can see here, like this is about 32 meters, and this is about 16 here. Or sorry, well this is actually, I think like that is 16 or 8. I don't remember anymore. But you don't want your border to be like right here, because you want a little bit of extra margin to work with. And that's just kind of a standard thing. Oh yeah, details of the out of bounds area. I think I could do a better job of bringing in these horizons, which you can actually barely see. Oh, there's one little mountain there. Yeah, because you can really tell that you're floating in this space. There could be like a raised thing here. Maybe I could put a farm in the background. But right now there's just a lot of trees. And there's some terrain elevation, but it's kind of boring. But, it's only 3 points. This is more of like putting a little extra cherry on top. Or, oh, someone made a cool little out of bounds thing, like a custom windmill or a mine shaft or something. And it's like, okay, cool, I'll give them bonus point for that. But you basically, you don't want like there's some maps that you'll find in the workshop where these have these out of bound horizon elements will be super close, and even though they're far away, they're like kind of low resolution, so you will like pan the camera down and get this really low poly, low texture, low resolution texture right in your face. And if you want to take some cinematic screenshots, you kind of want to have a decent showing. It's like, this doesn't look so bad, but that's because the edge here is kind of obscured by all the trees. Yeah, what else here? Oh yeah, soft map edge interactivity layer. I kind of already went over that. Another point here is that you want this to be a very smooth line. You don't want to get yourself trapped in a kind of hook or a corner. Like a sharp corner is okay, but you don't want to kind of have a but you don't want a kind of squiggly line, because then the camera's going to get all jittery and it might even get pretty stuck. This kind of gentle angle I think is okay. I try to paint this as gently as possible, but because it's not on a perfectly right angle, it's going to be a little wavy like this. So the final category or subcategory of art is presentation and map regions. Cohesiveness does the combination of terrain, territory, map, objects, and unique elements create distinct regions of the map. Are these regions distinct enough so it's easy to tell where you are with a quick glance? And do the regions fit cohesively together? And B is appeal. Overall, is the map unique, interesting, and inviting? This element I've kind of touched on in other elements, but it's because it's so important and all-encompassing. It's really about the identity of your map. And this map, I'd say it's pretty unique. It's a giant 18th century star fort with a city in the middle. But it's not something I plucked out of my imagination. It's based on a couple of real world locations in France and northern Italy. And I mean, it's unique. I think the walls kind of serve as a decent border. Once you kind of zoom in, maybe you do kind of feel like you're in a bit of a, what's the right word? I'm not sure. I'm not a siege engineer expert, but it does feel like you're in, I don't know, kind of cramped location, perhaps. Like you're in the danger zone, maybe. That was interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think it looks cool. But it's just the appeal. This section is really more about can you easily tell where you are at a glance? So maybe these four corners are distinct enough. Maybe they're not. Maybe the city just takes up such a large area of the map. I don't know if the city is distinct enough. It's really hard to judge your own work. There are kind of unique elements within the city. Like this is a bit more of a kind of fancy area up here. We've got some cafes. We've got a little garden. We've got a kind of a fancy area with this tree. When it's the night atmosphere, we've got these lights on. Over here, it's a bit more industrial. We've got a bit of a little parking lot happening. We've got kind of industrial brick building, some tires, some brick piles. Got the train yard as well. But there's some overlap where, we've got another garden area. The middle, sure, distinct. We don't really see these elements throughout. Plus, we've got
the trolley line here. But again, there's a lot of trees. There's some bit of an urban farm here. And the bottom is just like a military, I want quite a base, but like a logistics hub. There's trucks, equipment, various accoutrements. But again, gardens everywhere. I don't know. It's, like I said before, it's hard to judge your own work and judge it fairly. There's some military stuff outside here. We've got the bunkers as well. But these corners are really just bare grass that I try to make different through art. I don't know if that really works. And by art, I really kind of mean tiles. These walls are a bit unique, but I don't know. How different is needed? I'm not sure. But yeah, thanks for bearing with me. If you watched all of this hour-long section about the rubric and trying to break it down and for what you want to look for, we're gonna now move to my closing statements, final thoughts, etc. So, thank you. Let's keep her moving.
Thank you everyone for following along with me. I hope this was helpful. Judges, be sure to get your scores in this week. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I've gone ahead and scheduled a playtest for Wednesday, June 24th at 2000 hours UTC. You're not obligated to make it, but if you'd like to get another round on some maps against real people, please drop in. One final thank you for the mappers, judges, and the community at large. Your efforts in making, testing, and providing useful feedback on these maps have got them to this great point. I'm hoping that we'll see many of them in Co3's Quick Match pool sooner rather than later. And one final thank you to Relic, of course. They're providing the $2,500 in prize pool, and Will has taken time to give all the maps valuable feedback. I'll be calculating the results and coming out with another video next month, so stay tuned. All relevant links to the competition are below in the description, and of course, much more information can be found about the competition and mapping in general if you join the Worldbuilders Discord server. Thanks everyone, take care.